Welcome back to Let's Make a Game. In this video, I would like to briefly discuss three subjects which I believe are underused in role-playing games. And by role-playing games, this time I'm talking about computer role-playing games and tabletop role-playing games, even though this channel is mostly about computer role-playing games. I think that these subjects seem to be underserved in the tabletop world as well. Now, before I start, please note that underserved doesn't mean not served at all. I'm sure there are games that have these subjects. I know there are games that have these subjects, in fact, and I know there are computer games and tabletop games that have these subjects. But it seems to me that they have a potential and an interest that would suggest that they should have a much higher percentage of products coming out devoted to them than they actually do. So the three subjects are animals, hunter-gatherers, and robots after human extinction. And I'll just go through them in that order. So when I talk about animals, that's a spectrum, because when you make a game where the player, who is a human, is controlling an animal, inevitably, of course, they're going to be making decisions with their human brain. So the animal character, so called, is going to be really a humanized animal. It's unavoidable. There's a spectrum of how much you make the characters human. So on the one side, you might have mice that are like real mice, i.e. they can't talk, they certainly don't communicate with other species. They perhaps they've got sort of 10 or 12 signals they can send to other mice, and they sort of operate on instinct. Perhaps they don't have will, so perhaps the human character tries to get them to do something, and then the game says, well, actually, no, your instinct tells you that's what you sort of want to do, but your instinct makes you do this, and you're a creature of instinct. And that's sort of one spectrum. And then you could say, well, perhaps they are like mice in that they live in burrows and they forage for food, but they can talk to each other. They can communicate with each other as if they were humans, and they have more complex inner lives and more complex communication than real animals do. And then the next thing you could say is, well, perhaps they're able to talk. Perhaps all animals can talk to each other. That's quite a common degree of anthropomorphization, that they're still not using technology and they're still not using clothes, but all animals can speak the same language, and so they're talking to each other, and so on. You can add clothes. You could have a civilization of mice after an apocalypse or something. I know that's actually the subject of a real game. But people have been using animals to represent different aspects of humanity for thousands of years. This is a thing that happens in all different cultures. And yet, when it comes to role-playing games, which are another way of thinking about sort of different aspects of the human condition, we don't seem to do it. We seem to be a lot more comfortable saying my character is a demon or my character is an elf than saying my character is a mouse or my character is a cat. And that strikes me as quite strange, and it strikes me as not using a lot of information that we have, because when I think about animals, I'm not a person with any expertise in animals. I studied English literature. I've never studied biology or had any even great interest in animals apart from sort of having a couple of pets. But I can name 10 or 12 species that live near me, which is to say in the suburbs of a large city in Australia. Your list is going to be different, but you probably do have a list. I could say, well, there's mice and there's ants and there's cats and there's dogs, and I can say that the dogs sort of chase the cats. They don't really kill the cats, but they sort of threaten them and intimidate them. And cats eat mice, and mice forage for food, and ants forage for food, and birds have this relation. And I could tell you essentially a setting, a quite detailed setting with 10 different non-human species that are interacting with each other. And as well as that, I have cultural knowledge. So if I want to be a bit more fantastical in representing animals, I can say, well, owls are wise, foxes are cunning, which means they're clever, but they're not quite trustworthy. Rats are sort of dirty and sort of slightly threatening, etc., etc. Eagles are haughty, and so on and so on. And again, that list, your associations might be different. In fact, probably are different, because those associations are basically cultural. They're not real characteristics of the animal. But I'm sure that you do have a list of characteristics that you ascribe to animals, because again, that's a thing that all human beings seem to do. That sound was probably what we call a possum running across the roof. I don't know if you heard that rumbling sound, but yeah, that's another animal that lives around me. Not the same thing as what Americans call possums. This is the native Australian animal. But anyway, and so we have this knowledge, we have this sort of setting, and so I would find it reasonably easy if I had to say, well, what would the adventures of a mouse be? Well, perhaps they were foraging for food in a house, but then the people in the house have set up mouse traps, and suddenly it's become quite deadly to do this, and so they've got to find another source of food. Okay, well, what are the threats that they face perhaps we could say they're in the wilderness, or perhaps we can say they're in a built-up area like the area where I live. Okay, well, there's roads are pretty difficult. There's they can get in and out of houses. They can sort of there's what's the word? There's holes in houses. There's holes in human structures that humans don't know about that they can sneak in. There's bigger animals that prey on them, but they can escape by sort of hiding in their holes, and so on and so on. If you want to get more fantastical, and you want to have groups of animals not just talking to each other but cooperating, so you have an adventuring party made up of animals, well, you have essentially knowledge about you might call them different classes. Like I would say, well, if we had different animals that I know about, well, birds can fly, and so that allows them to scout areas and to get into places that other animals can't. Mice are small, so that allows them to sort of be unseen and allows them to sneak into areas that other people can't get into. And then if we're talking about this scale, then maybe there's cats are sort of strong and savage. They're bigger than other animals, and those are like adventuring classes. And again, you probably have all of this knowledge or information about the different animals that live near you. But it largely goes unused. It's information of a type that is useful for making role-playing games, because we want to know what different types of creatures are there. How do they interact with each other? What do they want? What do they do? What are they good at? What are they bad at? What are the sorts of situations in which different creatures will be in conflict with each other or in conflict with the environment? This is all the stuff we want to know when we're creating an adventure game, and this is stuff that we probably sort of have in our minds about animals. And yet, animals are not, often the subject of role-playing games. They're very much the subject of sort of popular culture, from sort of Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, which is probably the most unrealistic, and then we can go to sort of Finding Nemo, where they're sort of like fish, but they're still basically humans in fish bodies. And then, maybe we would say that Watership Down is a bit more realistic than that, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's very much in popular culture, but it doesn't seem to make its way into gaming for some reason. Anyway, so that's the first topic. The second topic is hunter-gatherers. For most of the time that human beings have been alive, in fact, for over 99%, I think, of the time that human beings have been alive, everyone on Earth has been a hunter-gatherer, unless archaeologists have sort of made a terrible mistake and there's been some great civilization that has disappeared without a trace. everyone on Earth was a hunter-gatherer, and they lived lives that are very similar to the lives of people in a fantasy adventure setting. That is, they were often in conflict with things that were bigger and nastier than them and which they didn't properly understand. Their survival was not guaranteed. They were often in danger. They were often fighting. They were often running for their lives. It depends on the group of hunter-gatherers, but it's certainly quite plausible that a hunter-gatherer, one of our own ancestors, might have found themselves in a situation that is like the situation of a fantasy adventurer in a lot of important ways. And yet, again, we don't seem to have many. And again, I'm not saying there aren't any. There are role-playing games about animals, and there are role-playing games about hunter-gatherers, but we don't seem to have many explorations of the lives of hunter-gatherers. And again, it could be, there's degrees of realism, right? For example, are there beliefs about magic going to be true in the world of the game? Is it the case that painting animals on a cave wall makes there be more game, which we believe to be something that hunter-gatherers probably thought? It's difficult to know what they thought, of course, because they didn't write their beliefs down. But it seems likely that that's why they created pitch. And it doesn't matter whether they did or not anyway, because the goal here is not sort of anthropological reconstruction. The goal is making a fun game. So it doesn't matter if it's true or untrue, it's just as long as it's cool, basically. So you could have a game in which having the skill of painting, and if you make a save on painting, you've actually painted oxen well enough that there are going to be more oxen, and that's going to make hunting easier for you, right? You could have a world in which none of that's true and it's all completely realistic. You could have a world in which it's not true, but it affects how you behave. So, in other words, if you perform a ritual that grants you invincibility, it doesn't actually grant you invincibility, but everyone's going to be a bit stronger and tougher because they're more confident, they're more brave, they're going to be more intimidating, for example. And there's no reason why. Again, it's not accurate reconstruction. You can always have hunter-gatherers in conflict with something else. What if Atlantis was real? What if Atlantis was real and trying to take the lands of hunter-gatherers? That seems to be a common. It seems to be a common theme in stories about animals, that humans are occupying what was wilderness, and then the animals are pushed out, and therefore the animals have to go and find somewhere else. I think that's the theme of Watership Down. I can't remember off the top of my head. But certainly you could have that in hunter-gatherers as well. You are hunter-gatherers, suddenly these people come who have this, what seems to be basically magic to you. They can kill from a distance. They're basically evil wizards. You can't possibly stand up against them. You have to leave. You have to figure out how to survive. And, ideally you have to come back and try and sort of prevail against them. It's an interesting, it's an interesting world. A lot of people, have a lot of interest in early humans or the immediate ancestors of humans or the sort of side branches, the Neanderthals and the Denisovans. But it doesn't seem to be put into gaming. And when it is put into gaming, it's often not. It's often we often project back ideas that aren't ideas they would have had. So we often have a very sexist society in ancient. We often have hunter-gatherers being very, very sexist, where men are me hit woman on head with club and drag back to cave. And this, that's not really what happened. Patriarchy, the sort of institutional dominance of men, is a function of agriculture. It's actually something agriculture and herding anyway. It's something that happened when people ceased to be hunter-gatherers. It's not really something that real cavemen, which is not a very good name anyway, actually did. And the other thing is that they didn't talk like that. They didn't say, "Og, my name Og." There were creatures sort of before anatomically modern humans that perhaps would have been like that, would have been sort of primitive of brain. But um, anatomically modern humans, they had modern human brains, right? Except for malnutrition and injury, they were just as intelligent as we are. They would have put that brain power into different things. Of course, they wouldn't have known anything about how to use and make technology. They wouldn't have been familiar with the scientific method. They would have known a hell of a lot about plants, probably because they'd die if you eat the wrong plant, But they would have been quite intelligent. But so you can make quite an interesting um, setting if you look past the stereotypes. But whatever. If you like the stereotypes, you like the stereotypes. You can have a game about macho cavemen called Og if that's what you want as well. I suppose it's just not something that interests me. But either way, they seem to be underused. And finally, I would like to talk about robots, specifically robots after humans, after human extinction. This is an idea that comes up occasionally. I'm sure it's been covered in science fiction, although the only science fiction that I've read about it has actually been a webcomic rather than a story. But the idea that humans may make robots that are alive, right, that have consciousness, that have selves, that can think, that have internal lives, that are people, I guess, in that sense, and then go extinct. Often, because the robots killed them, but in the webcomic that I read, it was just because humans weren't very interested in perpetuating the species anymore, and it was more fun to have sex with robot companions anyway, and so they just died. They died out, but they died out sort of quite happy, and they left robots to do what they want, sort of thing. And this is an idea that's explored in science fiction in a lot of different ways. Often it's kind of quite sad, like often it's post-apocalyptic, and you get robots trying to understand their purpose. There's a famous story called "There Will Come Soft Rains" by Ray Bradbury about it's not a living thing. It's an automated house, sort of analogous to Siri, I guess, basically. Although it was written way before there was such a thing, that is continuing to turn the lights on and set off the alarms and stuff after humans have died in a nuclear war. That's probably not a very good basis for gaming, because that's hopeless. I mean, that's probably a good basis for storytelling, but not a good basis for gaming. You could have really any tone. It could be sad. It could be robots who are looking for humans. There must be humans left because we are programmed to serve humans, and therefore, without humans, we are purposeless, and therefore we must go to find humans. Or it may be comical. We are robots. I am a robot who is programmed to maximize the output of this machine. Now, I know that I was programmed to do that because humans wanted this machine to make paperclips. The humans are all dead now, but that doesn't matter. That's what I want. It's just what I want. It's the same, it's the same way humans want to have sex. When we want to have sex, if we do want to have sex, we don't think, I want to have sex because evolution has produced me, a creature that wants to have sex, because wanting to have sex is evolutionarily valuable. We don't think about it. We just want what we want. And so you can have creatures who are, dedicated to collecting as many paper clips as possible. That could be a satire on, acquisitiveness. It could be a satire on role-playing games. Why are the robots risking their lives for paperclips? Well, I don't know. Why are your adventurers risking their lives for XP? It's the same thing. Or it could be, it could be more. We robots are programmed to explore, and so we explore. We explore other planets. That doesn't have to be sad. It doesn't have to be satirical, and you have a lot of possibilities for your characters, because the characters they don't have to be just metal people. They can be, but they can have whatever powers and abilities you want. And you could say that that's true of magic as well, but it's probably a little bit more satisfying, I think, or potentially some people anyway will find it more satisfying to think about technological ways in which different things can happen. Why can I see in the dark? Why can I? Well, because I've got infrared scanners. Why can I? Why am I invisible to other robots but not invisible to animals? Well, that's because I have a particular thing that fouls up the optical systems that most robots use. Et cetera, right? You can have powers and abilities that are way beyond those of humans, but are plausible. It's quite plausible to think that a robot can see in the dark, because when we have machines that can see in the dark, of course we do. We have sensors that can see in the dark. Well, a robot with one of those can see in the dark. And so you have sort of wide open characters and a wide open idea for setting, and yet maybe because it's so wide open, I don't know. But people don't seem to use it for gaming. People use it. It's present in fiction to a great degree, but it's not present in gaming. So I hope you agree with those. If you don't, let me know. If you do, let me know. That's just my personal opinion. Of course, underused isn't an objective quality. I haven't measured. You can't measure these. You can't measure overusedness, right? It's a personal opinion. It just strikes me that these three themes have a lot of the sort of detail that is relevant to coming up with role-playing game ideas, and yet they seem to be very rare, not non-existent, but quite rare in actual games. So maybe that provided some inspiration for you. Maybe you'll make a game about robot animals who fight hunter-gatherers. I don't know. Let me know in the comments, and I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.